right. Well, thank you, Dan. I will call this February 11th meeting of the ORCAA to order and appreciate everyone being here. Since we have guests and everything, why don't we do a quick round of introductions? Why don't we start in the room with the board and then we'll go to the Zoom room and then back to Jeff to introduce the staff. So, Emily, you want to say hi?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Good to be here. I'm Emily Klaus, Thurston County Commissioner.
I'm Ryan Siu, Lacey City Council member.
Welcome, Ryan. Great to have you here from Lacey, new representative to the ORCAA board. I'm Greg Brotherton, Jefferson County's representative and a commissioner, and the chair of ORCAA this year. And we'll pass it over to Randy.
I'm Randy Netherland, Mason County Commissioner.
And Mike.
Hello, Mike French, Clallam County Commissioner.
And Paul.
Paul Barrett, City Council member for the City of Olympia.
Old school now. This is his second meeting. Dave, you want to say hi?
Dave Tobin, Pacific County Commissioner.
Have you here in Georgia?
Good morning, Georgia Miller, a Grays Harbor County Commissioner.
All right, almost everyone. I don't think we have anyone from Tumwater today, but why don't we turn it back to you, Jeff, to lead us through introducing staff.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Johnston, Executive Director at ORCAA. Joining me in the room, Mike Schultz, Compliance Manager, Odell Hadley, Senior Air Monitoring Specialist, Tyson Justice, Financial Services Manager, Tiffany Flores, Record Specialist, ORCAA Public Records Officer, and taking minutes this morning. Debbie Moody, Operations Manager. Upstairs running Zoom from his office is Dan Nelson, ORCAA's Communications Manager, and also listening in and helping with Zoom is Chris Kraus, ORCAA's IT System Administrator. And so then with that.
I'm Jeff Myers from Law Lyman, Legal Counsel for ORCAA.
Thanks for being here, Jeff. And Meredith, I don't know, do you want to give your a quick introduction? We'll have more time as when we come to your rooted in respiration talk.
Sure. My name is Meredith McCormick. I'm here today in Baltimore and Johns Hopkins.
Great. Thanks for being here. Okay, I guess we'll get going with the approval of the agenda. I don't know, I'm not aware of anything that needs to be added to the agenda, but absent that, I'd welcome a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
Been moved by Dave.
Second.
Second by Ryan. All in favor of approving the agenda as presented, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. That is unanimous. And we'll move on to the chair report. Don't have too much to talk about today. I'm eager to get into our guest's presentation, but we do have to kind of ratify the temporary decisions that we made in December as we have a normal cadence. We'll next meeting or in April, I guess, do the officers one more time. But now we need to ratify the finance committee, which I had appointed on a temporary basis before. And I would love to, if the existing members, which is the vice chair, Emily Klaus and Michael French and Randy Netherland, are still willing to serve in those roles, to continue in those roles. I don't know, I can't see Emily, but is that, do I get a assent from you as well,
Yes.
Emily? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
absolutely.
Thank you. We've only just begun, and Emily's doing a great job leading it. We'll get to her report out from our finance committee meeting this morning in just a little bit, and we discussed a lot of things that are of real import for the ORCAA board. But I think it's really just on me, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, to appoint them. I don't think it's an action we take as a board. So since they are all willing and already serving in that role, I will appoint Emily Klaus as the chair of the finance committee, and the rest of the finance committee to be Michael French and Randy Netherland, and I will attend as the chair of the ORCAA board as well. Okay. With that, we'll turn it over, speak of the devil, to Emily for our finance report out. Finance committee report.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Chair. All right, so we had a good conversation this morning at the ORCAA Finance Committee meeting. We just had a couple agenda items, and some of which were continuations from discussions last month. We were able to move forward for recommendation to the full board, a couple of items. starting with the discussion related to asbestos and demolition fees. You all might remember this item from last one. The finance committee had a couple of questions for staff and they did a great job answering those questions and bringing it back to us again this month. So we were comfortable moving it forward for recommendation for approval by the full board. That passed unanimously at the finance committee meeting. We did have some pretty thorough discussion around what this means. The fee increases are relatively minor, but you know, it does impact people. So people who have to pay the increased fee, we talked about how this might impact them. For example, the single family residence current amount for asbestos and demolition fees is $47, but the proposed amount is $100. And this helps to cover the costs associated with issuing the notification, any sort of hand-holding staff might have to, you know, help the applicant with as they move forward with their asbestos or demolition projects. Well, demolition projects that may have asbestos components. In many cases, they don't, but it still does exist. And so it's important to have some form of resource that you can go to if you're getting ready to start a project like this. So ORCAA is able to kind of help people through that process and answer questions they might have. We did get a good example from Dan during the discussion who talked about like a kitchen remodel cost. And I didn't write the numbers down, but I remember the cost of the project, you know, Dan said he received quotes ranging anywhere from like $50,000 to I think $78,000 for the remodel. And he could, as an example, he could file the $100, he could pay $100 for the project amount for a single family residence, and then potentially do the work himself to, you know, take out cabinets, tiles, which could save anywhere from like $5,000 to $7,000 in the overall cost of the project. So by paying this $100 fee, he could save several thousands of dollars by paying, you know, that he wouldn't have to pay for a contractor to do that work. So that kind of helped bring people to the ground as far as like what is the actual impact on a family, and that was a great example. So I was asked to share that example in my report out. So that, like I said, the fee proposal did pass as far as a recommendation to the full board. We also had a couple new business items, and these also passed unanimously. One of them was the recommendation for approval of a budget amendment. And I won't go into details unless there's questions on that, or Jeff, do you want to add any details about the amendment?
The amendment actually is on the agenda for later during new business on this meeting, so we'll have more conversation about that.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And then the last item on our agenda this morning was the registration fee increase. And this was also a conversation that the finance committee decided to move forward for recommendation, while also considering in the future ways that staff can streamline processes and kind of keep us in the loop on what those improvements are as far as potential cost savings in the future. But we decided to recommend approval of increasing, which is so the total increase would be 5%. That would include the 2.8% for the CPI, and then 2.2% additional on top of that. And I think that's it. Do you want, and the 2.2%, do you want to speak to that?
Well, we'll talk. So I think the finance committee recommended bringing this to the full board at the March meeting. We'll have more time for full discussion with the board of the asbestos and demolition fee increases, as well as the registration fee increases.
Yeah.
So I think, so I guess I would ask to defer more discussion on those for our March meeting.
Yeah,
If that
perfect.
works.
Yeah, thank you. You beat me to the punch. I had that as my last little bullet point. Yeah, so the full board will see more information come forward from staff, but that's just kind of a preview of what to expect in March, and then more thorough budget conversations, of course, coming up in April. So that's all I have.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. If no one has anything to add, I think you covered it well. We'll move on to public comment. So I don't know if we have anyone from the public with us today, but we'd love to hear from you. This is your opportunity. I think single opportunity for public comment today on any topics on our agenda. If you're interested in making a public comment, you have 3 minutes and you can hit the raise hand button or *9 if you're on the phone. I don't think that we have any public in person, so.
We have a couple people, I'm guessing for the presentation, AJ and Jody. If they want to comment, now's the time. Otherwise, if you're just here for the presentation.
AJ is my executive aide, so she's here just to help me out, but no comments from her.
Great. I'll make one more call for public comments. Okay, great. Thanks for being here, Jody. And I will close public comment and we'll move on to the consent agenda. So we have both the minutes from January 14th as well as the expenditures and disbursements for January. Any comments on that? Or I would welcome a motion if people are ready.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
And I will second.
It's been moved by Emily, seconded by Randy. Is that right? Or Ryan?
Dave.
Or Rand?
Dave.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. I swear that the owl camera in ORCAA has a mind of its own. It really it does not necessarily focus on the people that are talking. It makes it a little challenging, but okay, great. Well, we are on to our presentation. We've all met Dr. Meredith McCormick, and I don't know, Jeff, you've talked about it a little bit before, but you want to tee this up and give a formal introduction to Dr. McCormick?
Yes. Yeah, I would love to. So thank you, Greg. So I am very excited to welcome Dr. Meredith McCormick to our meeting this morning, joining us via Zoom for her presentation. Dr. McCormick gave a similar presentation at the National Association for Clean Air Agencies meeting last October. And I found it a really compelling and accessible presentation about why agencies like ORCAA do what we do. We at ORCAA are not public health experts, but our mission to promote air quality and take actions to protect the health and welfare of people and the natural environment in our 6 counties is motivated by the linkage between air quality and public health. Listening to Dr. McCormick last fall, it struck me that this would be a really good presentation for the board to hear, so that this is information that you all have as you make decisions about the agency and the work that we do. So Dr. McCormick is a professor of medicine and the director of the Division of Pulmonary and Critical Care at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. She has clinical expertise in asthma and COPD, as well as pulmonary physiology and pulmonary function testing. Dr. McCormick is a physician scientist funded by the NIH and formerly funded by the EPA, with the research focus on the effect of environmental influences on lung health, specifically air pollution, diet, obesity influences on COPD and asthma. She serves as the current director of the Breathe Center, which investigates environmental exposure and lung health, and the Johns Hopkins Asthma Precision Medicine Center for Excellence. So again, please join me in welcoming Dr. McCormick to the ORCAA board meeting this morning.
Thanks very much for the invitation to be here. I'm excited to talk to you today and have a short presentation, and then would welcome questions and discussion. And so I'm in Baltimore today. I'm a physician. I take care of patients with chronic lung disease, including asthma and COPD, and have spent about the last 20 years studying air pollution health effects, as was just described. Well, you can see my slides okay?
Yes.
So I thought I'd just start with kind of an overview of how I think about the intersection between health and air quality, and maybe just talk a little bit about breathing 101. So as we're all sitting here, we're hopefully restfully breathing, like the schematic here. And we'll think about what that means in terms of air entering our body. When air comes into our body, the first place it enters is the nose or the mouth. And actually, a lot of our breathing takes place by breathing through the nose. And in our nose is hair and mucus. And that's part of our natural host defenses to really try to clean the air even more as it enters our body, and things like dust and particles get trapped in the hair and mucus like we see here. And we know that when air quality is bad, sort of like you might see in this filter you would change in your home or in your dryer, that if the nose acts as a filter, some of the dust and particles gets trapped, but often if you're at a high pollution day, the system might get a little bit overwhelmed and more of the particles would enter deeper It's worth mentioning also that even in our upper airway, and in our, as the air goes down into our trachea, our windpipe, and then the pipes sort of branch, there's more host defenses to try to keep the particles out. So we have cells that have these hair-like projections that are constantly sweeping, and they sort of sweep the particles so that you can cough them out and prevent particles from getting deeper into the lungs. And then finally, the primary function of the lungs is to exchange gas, is to bring in oxygen from the air and to expel carbon dioxide that accumulates in our body. And that happens here at the level of the alveoli. So these are these little sacs that are at the very farthest part of the lung. They're sort of the lung tissue is made of these alveoli. And you can see surrounding the alveoli is this network of blood vessels. So the capillaries sit right next to the alveoli, and it's at that interface that gas exchange occurs. And so air is being breathed in, and your oxygen is being pumped out to your bloodstream, and your carbon dioxide goes back into the alveoli and it gets exhaled. By way, I'm going to come back to this, but there are these cells that roam basically throughout the alveoli. We call them macrophages. And these cells are kind of like little Roombas. They clean up particles. And so again, another part of our host defense to try to make sure that we're breathing the clearest air, and that if you have pollution that enters the deepest part of the lungs, we have some more host defenses to try to clean that out. I think one thing that maybe we don't always appreciate is that our lungs are in constant contact with the external environment. As we're sitting here restfully breathing, we turn over about 7.5 liters. So if you can imagine, 3 or 4 3-liter or 2-liter bottles of soda every minute. And then if we're exercising or we're more active, we increase the amount of air that we turn over. And if we're vigorously exercising, it can go up to 100 liters. And it's also worth noting that children have a relatively higher amount of air that they turn over relative to their body size. And this is probably one of several reasons that kids are probably a little bit or are more susceptible to air pollution health effects. I think when I think about an organ or a part of our body that's really at risk of being in constant contact with the external environment, I think many of us think about our skin and a sunburn, and how if we have a dramatic experience, or it's a very hot sunny day, that you can have direct damage. The lungs aren't as evident, but they're sitting inside our body in constant exposure. And so they also can have toxicity, which can translate into health effects beyond the lungs. So this is my favorite pollutant, particulate matter. And we talk about it a lot, and it's regulated, as you all know, based on particle size. And so why is that important? This is particulate matter relative to a human hair, and then relative to a grain of sand. So you can see the particles are very, very small. PM10, the larger particles are there represented with the blue spheres, and PM 2.5 are represented with the pink or red spheres, so they're even smaller. And what's not shown on this slide is ultrafine particles, and these are even smaller. And so when we're thinking about breathing air in, the larger particles typically get trapped in the nose and upper airway, but the PM 2.5 or fine particles can get all the way to the alveoli. And the ultrafine particles that are even smaller, there's direct scientific evidence in animal studies with radiolabeled particles that shows that the smallest particles can translocate, and they actually can enter the bloodstream across that alveolar capillary space and can go throughout the body, including the brain. So probably the fact that those ultrafine particles are able to move throughout the body is probably one way that that's one of the mechanisms that drives the multi-system health effects that are known to occur from pollution. So there's strong evidence that particle pollution contributes to asthma and chronic lung disease, including risk of asthma attacks or COPD exacerbations. We also know that particle pollution increases risk of heart attacks, heart failure, arrhythmias or abnormal heart rhythms, increases the risk of stroke. There's increasing evidence that particle pollution increases the risk of Alzheimer's, as well as different types of cancers, including lung cancer and kidney cancer, and that it can contribute to obesity and diabetes. Particle pollution probably impacts health in multiple different ways. And there's evidence supporting each of these different pathways, including immune pathways. So it makes sense that if particles, for example, have allergen, and we know that larger particles especially contain allergen, that when these particles are breathed in, the allergic pathways are activated, that they can directly influence the lining and cause inflammation and oxidative stress, that they can translocate and cause heart problems, as well as directly altering DNA methylation and can cause epigenetic changes. I have this slide here because there's a lot of evidence that particle pollution impacts lung growth and development. And so this is important because, as I mentioned, kids are even more susceptible to pollution. And so this is a schematic that shows that those alveoli, the little airway sacs, when a baby's born, they only have about 20% of what they need. And in the first several years of life, the lungs grow and develop. And so when young children are exposed to air pollution, we know that their lungs don't develop at the same rate as healthy children. Some of the evidence supporting this finding goes back to those alveolar macrophages. So these cells that are in the body, this is a study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine showing that children who live near pollution sources, including traffic and industry, had more particles in their cells, in their lungs, and that those children that had more particles that they could measure under microscope had lower lung function, suggesting that the pollution they were living near impacted their lung growth and development. That's just one example of the type of scientific evidence that links pollution to children's health. And we know that through a large body of evidence that air pollution is associated with lower birth weight, with lower lung function, and causes childhood asthma and more frequent exacerbations of asthma or bronchitis. And also that being exposed to pollution as a child increases your risk of chronic lung disease as an adult. If we zoom out globally, we know that air pollution is responsible for millions of deaths around the globe and is a major driver of morbidity and mortality in the United States. And this is just a list of the types of evidence that have been demonstrated both acutely, so meaning short-term spikes in particulate pollution has been associated with the health effects in the top, and that chronically we know that being exposed over time increases risk for chronic lung disease, chronic heart disease, diabetes, and so forth. There's also a lot of scientific evidence and studies that have shown that when we reduce air pollution, we improve health. And those have been in different lenses looking at health. So improvements in death. So reducing air pollution reduces the risk of death. It reduces the hospitalizations for children who have bronchitis or early life infections. When we reduce air pollution, it helps people as they're growing attain higher lung function. And as we age, we all lose some lung function. And if you're living in a cleaner environment in terms of air quality, the rate of loss of lung function is less. This is a resource that I really like and use a lot. It's a report put out every year by the American Lung Association. It's called The State of the Air. If you go onto their website, you can plug in your zip code and you get a report or a report card for your local area in terms of air quality. And they rate it just like you would rate a report of a grade. This year's report showed that nearly half of people in the United States live in areas with unhealthy levels of air pollution, especially on the West Coast, but increasingly on the East Coast. Wildfires are one of the contributors that we're seeing more frequently. And it's also, this report and prior reports also suggest that living in a lower income community or living in a community where there are more people of color, that you're at higher risk for having poor air quality. I wanted to highlight this study because I think it's really relevant when we're thinking about air quality standards. This is recently published also in the New England Journal. And what it shows here is that even in the lower levels of particulate pollution, so here looking at a range from 6 to 12 going across the bottom, and on the y-axis here, this is the hazard for death, or like the risk of death. And so if we lower air pollution standards or lower the average air pollution concentrations, we see a benefit in terms of the risk of death at the population level. So really showing that even small changes, even within the realm of having air quality that's fairly good, can still confer a health benefit. And this is another way of looking at this that I think is really relevant for those of you in the room today. This is a companion report that's put out by the American Thoracic Society. And I do a lot of work with both the American Lung Association and the American Thoracic Society. And what this group did is they looked at comparing the current standards for air quality, both in terms of long-term and short-term standards. And they looked at what if we lowered those standards and made the air quality even better. And so going from example, like a 12 to an 8 or a 35 daily to a 25 level. And they used modeling, but what they found was that we would basically save hundreds or save tens of thousands of lives, that we would improve or reduce the risk of lung cancer for thousands of people, and that we would save thousands of emergency room visits and hospitalizations, as well as lost days of work and school for children and adults. And in this publication, they, in the top 25 cities with the most to gain from lowering or making the standard more stringent, Seattle was the only state, or Seattle and Portland were both named 24 and 25. And you can see each year with a lower particulate matter standard, you would gain or reduce death for hundreds of people, improve birth outcomes, and reduce morbidity with things like hospitalizations and emergency department visits for thousands of people. So the big takeaways are that air pollution has health consequences really across the lifespan for children, adults, and older adults, and that it affects lung health, but it really has health effects across all different types of organ systems. And so health effects that we all care about, and that improving our air quality really has opportunity to confer health benefits across the lifespan in our communities. And even at relatively low concentrations of air pollution, if we make our air quality even better, we still stand to gain measurable health benefits. So I'll stop there and would love to take any questions or have any discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. McCormick. And I invite staff as well as board members to raise their physical hand or their virtual hand with questions or comments for Dr. McCormick. And I see we've got Joan has joined us from Tumwater. Thanks for being here, Joan. Well, I'll start with my normal question. I think this is, as Jeff said, really accessible, Dr. McCormick. And the PM 2.5 is, something that we talk about a lot in the air quality and everything. I, aside from ORCAA's mission, often think, and back to our days of COVID and anything about indoor air quality as well as outdoor air quality, and we don't really have any agency that's responsible for it, and some of the amount of air that we go through that you talked about was pretty convincing. And you were on the slide pretty quickly about the different kind of comorbidities that came and the percentages from, and one of them was the indoor air quality issue. I guess my question is, when you talk about the income inequality and the health outcomes, do you attribute that more to kind of the built environment and air quality outside, or more to the air quality inside when we're talking about youth that are at higher health risks based on income?
Yeah. So you touch on a lot of really important topics. And one, I'll come back to the health equality issue, which we spend a lot of time thinking about. The bulk of my work has been on indoor air quality, or at least equally indoor and outdoor. And one reason I think that we're all sitting indoors, right? And we probably are going to spend most of our day in an indoor environment, probably in our home or where we work, or if we're a child in school. So indoor air quality is quite important. And there are unique indoor sources that also influence our air quality, probably even more than outdoor sources in many cases. But it's absolutely a fact that your indoor air quality is dictated in part by your outdoor air quality. And that makes sense, right? You're opening a door, the houses are leaky, and so forth. And especially when there's more of a gradient, like if you're in a wildfire, if you live near industry, or if you live near a major roadway, that the more of your indoor air quality will be dictated by outdoor air. So that's important. And then the state of the air report is really only about your outdoor air quality. And we know that if you live near, like, for example, there's great work out of Southern California that showed that children who live near a major roadway were more likely to have asthma than kids that lived farther away. And they were able to dissect some things out to really suggest that it was to isolate that traffic piece. So when we think about different communities and the risk of living in a poor community, or potentially also communities that fall along racial lines, or communities of color, that is outdoor air. So it's more likely that individuals are going to live in a community with poor outdoor air quality if they're poor communities of color. There are other factors that also drive indoor air quality, things like housing stock and different types of appliances, and whether or not someone smokes in the home, that also have different variability around socioeconomic lines as well. And I think those in total really drive a lot of the health disparities that we see, both indoor and outdoor sources of air pollution.
It's always the answer I get. Both are important, but I appreciate it. Other thoughts or questions for Dr. McCormick? And the slides were, of course, part of our packet today, so you can share those, and it's a great set of slides just to go through too. So I'll certainly share it at our Board of Health.
Well, since I'm not, actually, it looks like Dan has a question, so I'll
Yep,
let
we'll go to Dan and then to Jeff.
I was just going to note that with Dr. McCormick's blessing, I'm going to separate this presentation in the videos and post that separately on our YouTube channel with our board report.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, Mike, and then Jeff maybe had something?
Yeah, I'll just say that it's always good to remember, and this presentation is a good reminder, that the regulations that we enforce are based on sound science that is about protecting human lives. And so, as someone who's contracted asthma as an adult, which was idiopathic, and we don't know what, general air quality is the thing that produces the ability for humans to have successful lives, to have healthy outcomes. And, that's why we're here as an organization.
Maybe you're allergic to controversy, Mike. Have you thought about that?
Yeah. Developed it far before when I was a political official,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Okay. Dave.
I don't really have a question, just a comment. First of all, thank you, Dr. McCormick, for your presentation. And secondly, I think a takeaway that I had from it was emphasizing the importance of the work ORCAA does. And I don't know that we often think about it in terms of health impacts and those sorts of things, but I think the comments today really emphasize the importance of the work that ORCAA does.
Yeah, here. Thanks,
Thank
Dave.
you for that comment. I will say that this is an audience I don't often get to interact with, so it's great. I really appreciate the chance to be here and to just engage with your group today.
Great.
Great.
Well, if I could jump in, one of the things that struck me about the presentation that I saw last October, and Dr. McCormick, you emphasized this in some of your later slides, is that the health effects that are seen even at what are considered relatively low levels of PM 2.5. So again, in Washington, I mean, we're blessed in Western Washington with generally pretty good air quality. Our monitors are usually in the good, the air quality index is good, it's green, but except for when we have wildfire episodes, and you touched a little bit on that, but that even at levels that are considered good, there can be observed impacts. And so cleaning up the air, even just a little bit, does make a difference.
I'm glad you underscored that point as well. And it's also something I think that you can take away, even if you're thinking about indoor spaces and other ways. I really think of this more and more as a modifiable risk factor. So especially for people that may be susceptible, young children, people with any kind of chronic condition, the less air pollution that people are breathing in, the better. And there's no, the lower, the better. So.
Randy.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and thank you, Greg, for your comment, because you got my brain spinning, realizing the impact. I think of us as being air quality, and I don't separate them out usually in my head, but I do now. After this, I'm definitely separating in my head, and I'm thinking about my schools that I have. We spent a lot of money during COVID for the virus to put in machines that literally do away with the virus. But I've got some pretty old schools in some pretty interesting locations, and I can't help now but think about whether I should be pushing somewhere as a leader here in my community to start to get some better air quality for my kids that are trapped in those buildings for a great length of time. And even if they're not bad, if we can control the air in those buildings at the minimum, doesn't that give them like having an oxygen tank on? They have so many hours of clean, beautiful air. I don't know. This thing's kind of kicked me in the head a little bit and has me thinking. I appreciate the presentation and your comments, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Can I make one comment in response to your
Please.
I have done a lot of work in Baltimore City, actually. We've done air monitoring in Baltimore City schools. We've published several studies about it. Actually, our air quality here was a little bit better than we thought. So we were, happy to learn that. Although, again, still a good amount of room for improvement. And I think that you've hit on something really, really important, that schools are a place where we can impact populations of children. And that really there's a huge opportunity there because we know kids are there. We know they're there for a really large amount of time. And you can impact, dozens and hundreds and thousands of kids at a time. And many schools, like you described, already have had some attention in COVID to thinking about ventilation and improvement. And so attending to that, following that up, I think it's an opportunity locally and really nationally. So I'm glad you're thinking that way. We're thinking that way too. So appreciate that comment.
I've thought about schools a lot too. Appreciate the comments, and luckily the older schools have windows that open often, which is a a pretty a good step in air exchanging. I love the study that shows about how that studied German kids, I think, and was studying why they were always sleepy after lunch, and it was because there was just a lot of carbon monoxide in the air, and so they were just actually getting sleepy because of the air quality in the room. So we can certainly impact a lot of lives at the schools, right? That's what they're for. Great. Any other comments or questions for Dr. McCormick? Oh, Dan's got a comment. Indoor air, purple air monitor provided to the Shelton High School Science Department. That's great.
That's because you rock, Dan.
Say again, Randy?
That's because he rocks in this organization. That is a school. What's funny is they've got some issues there, but I think more like North Mason. We've got classrooms where the windows don't open. They've been like that since the 70s, and they're actually still using the ventilation systems that, the big giant things that are on the wall that bring it from the inside out. That could be good, I guess. But I'm just thinking about all the other stuff trapped in there for years and years and years and years that have been there since the 60s in certain parts of it. It's kind of amazing. I don't know why I never looked at it before. I go in those classes a lot. Now I'm going to be looking at it completely different when I go in those classes.
Great.
I have a question if there's still time. I know we have more on the agenda. I think it's really cool that like Portland and Seattle are in the list of the top 25 cities with the most to gain from lowering the PM standard, but I don't know a lot about what that means. And I would like to be able to go into the community and talk about that, but if you could maybe elaborate on like, what does that mean? And what does it look like functionally if we were to try, if like leaders in this area were to try to lower the PM standard to increase the odds of having this benefit?
Sure. Do you want me to spend a moment on that? Is there?
Please.
Sure. So if you were going to literally like try to explain this slide, I think the way you would do it is you would go back to here and say, because this, that data, for example, was about changing PM standard from an annual standard of 12, if you were going to lower it to 8. And then you would say that what that would mean, for example, for Seattle would be that you would project that 138 deaths that would be attributable to particulate matter in a year would be avoided by that change from 12 to 8, or that 2,600 hospitalizations for things like heart attacks or emergency visits would be avoided. These, I think the adversely impacted would be things like going to work, loss of school days, and so things that are less directly related to the event. So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of the literal way that you would try to read that. And the reference is there on the slides, on the prior.
Okay, perfect.
Quick comment
Adele,
slash question. So EPA did lower the standard to 9 for the long term, but there was talk about them rolling it back to 12.
They have proposed that.
So they proposed it, but we're still at 9 for the, right. So we are still at 9 for the long-term standard for the country, which is a little higher than 8, but we'll see if it stays. So just quick comment when you're looking at that we are currently at 9, not 12.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to potentially use that message, right? Is in you could say, look, if you rolled it back, this would be the number of potential adverse effects that you could anticipate.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Adele. Mike?
So I appreciate this was a pretty science-heavy presentation, and what you're presenting is a very science-heavy way to look at it. What this makes me think of is something like Vision Zero or Target Zero, which is looking at our transportation systems. What would we have to do to get to a point where we didn't regularly have traffic-related deaths? So, what would we have to do to live in a world where we didn't regularly have 2,000 deaths in Los Angeles a year that are attributable to air pollution? We'd have to do some probably significant things. You're talking about how do we edge it down, but I also think like we should be thinking of the big picture. What would it look like to live in a world in which we didn't have, and maybe that's not possible. I don't think it's possible in the transportation world either, but we still have that aspirational goal that makes us think as policymakers of what are the consequences of our actions from a policy perspective.
Thanks. I don't know if you had a response to that, Dr. McCormick?
No, I love it. I think you can, using clean energy and the transportation sector is a visible, I think, example of a vision that's put out that we can march toward. And we did see, people mentioned COVID earlier, we did see when the world stopped for really very, very grave and unfortunate reasons, that we saw this huge improvement in air quality from having this pause on industry and traffic, which we don't want to have a pause on society in that way. But we do know that there it's possible to have, very much cleaner air.
Great. Well, thank you so much for making time this morning or afternoon, I guess, for you, Dr. McCormick. It's really been educational. It's timely as we have a couple new members too, so I'm sure we can all breathe easier knowing how important it is to breathe easy. So,
Thanks very much. Have a great day.
yeah.
Thank you
Thanks.
very
Have a great
much.
day. Okay, well, that was great. And we'll go on to new business. And I don't know, Jeff or Tyson want to talk about the budget amendments that we considered in the finance and recommended approval of in the finance.
Sure, I think I'll just go straight to Tyson.
Okay. Dan, go ahead and pull up the board packet document. And just a quick note, if you, on page 2, there is a typo. If you scroll to page 2, please, Dan, you can notice that there's a breakout cost there. That's supposed to read heat pumps, not heat pumps. So I apologize for that. So yeah. Scroll back down to the income statement. Thank you, Dan. So due to unforeseen costs incurred after the adoption of the fiscal year 26 operating budget and the approval of the wood smoke reduction grant, ORCAA is requesting an amendment to the 2026 operating budget. This proposed amendment will be shifting $22,000 from the general fund line items, appropriating $111,400 from reserve funds into the general fund, and increasing the wood smoke reduction budget by $46,200. Scroll a little bit down, Dan. The items that are highlighted in green, that's where the gray are, that's where the changes are occurring in our operating budget. The general fund is moving $22,000 from retirement and reallocating $12,000 into alarm monitoring and $10,000 into monitoring CPO. In addition, the general fund is also reallocating $7,000 for medical and moving it into monitoring CPO. This allocation will help offset the fire and security panel replacement costs and the monitoring station move from Chica Peak. Moving to the fund appropriations. The amendment also includes an appropriation from the office building fund and tenant security deposit fund into the general fund. The amendment moves $111,000 from the office building fund to cover the cost of replacing 2 heat pumps and a roof replacement. We have estimated the cost of replacing the heat pumps to be $35,000 and the cost of replacing the roof to be approximately $76,000. We will also be moving $400 from the security deposit fund into the general fund. This is for a security deposit refund for a tenant who occupied room 104. Lastly, go back up to the first page of the income statement, Dan. Thank you. And then down, a little further. That's good. Lastly, we would like to increase the wood smoke reduction program budget by $46,200. This brings the budgeted expenditures to $157,200, which is half of the program award amount. We do expect to spend the half of the award amount this fiscal year and the remaining next fiscal year. And just as a reminder that those expenditures are reimbursable through the grant. These budget amendments will increase our projected deficit by $157,600. However, because we are shifting allocated general funds between line items, appropriating reserve funds, and spending reimbursable expenditures, the effective increase nets zero this fiscal year. The only cost increase associated with this amendment will be the cost of replenishing the office building capital fund, which we plan to contribute in fiscal year 2027 and onward. We respectfully request your approval to amend the fiscal year 26 budget according to the changes presented. These amendments will help ORCAA continue to operate and allow our expenditures not to exceed the 10% threshold. Any questions? Concerns?
Questions or concerns for Tyson? All right, that's people are quiet. One more. Any issues, or I'd welcome a motion. We want to approve these budget amendments if people are so inclined. So, thoughts?
Move to approve the 2026 fiscal year budget amendments.
I will
Second.
Been moved. We'll give Paul the second there. Any further conversation? Okay, moved by Emily, seconded by Paul. All in favor of approving the budget amendments as presented, indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. That is unanimous, and we'll move on to some policy and procedures manual changes. Jeff, are you going to lead this off?
I just say a few words that, again, at the last meeting, we talked about the process that we were going to be using to bring policy and procedure manual updates to the board. So we've got a couple relatively minor, quick updates this month that are outlined in a briefing memo that kind of explains some of the rationale and then shows the updated text. And so, I don't know, maybe I'll turn it over to Tyson at this point and see what all you'd like to say about the changes.
Sure. So yeah, hopefully you had a chance to look at the briefing memo, which explains what we're changing in the P&P manual. So we're presenting to you all two changes to our policy and procedure manual. These changes are to the jury duty section and inclusion of an EV charger use policy. So changes to the jury duty section include editing language for conciseness. We are also identifying authorized personnel. We have eliminated a max number of days for jury duty. And we also included treatment of jury duty pay, which was not part of the previous policy. So employer requirements only require employers to provide sufficient leave for jury duty. There is no legal obligation. Employers provide paid leave for jury duty. However, as a governmental agency, we encourage our staff to be active participants in our legal system. As such, we would like to reserve the right to compensate our employees while on jury duty so it doesn't create financial hardship. In addition, we have elected to allow staff to keep jury duty pay. Due to the minimal amount of jury duty pay, we see it as a reimbursement of costs rather than a payment of service. So also because of the varying length of jury duty and the potential of employees working while on jury duty, we have eliminated the 10-day cap. We do expect employees to work with their supervisor and executive director to establish a jury duty work schedule. Depending on the length of jury duty and the employee's willingness to work, that work schedule can include paid leave, unpaid leave, or a combination of both. We will also take into consideration agency historical practices when determining the amount of paid leave. The second change, we included an EV charger use policy. We've included a policy for EV charger use by staff members. This policy includes a de minimis use, prioritizing usage, and requiring staff to sign a usage agreement. And part of the document package, attachment B, I believe, it's a copy of the usage agreement. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Just briefly, the usage agreement requires acknowledgement by staff members that the EV chargers are not to be used as a primary charging source, and that employees are responsible for any risks associated with using the charger. And the agency vehicles do take priority over personal vehicles when using the EV chargers. In conclusion, we hope the board will approve these changes as they improve agency policy safeguards and provide greater clarity on policy implementation. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Tyson. Any questions? For updating two policies. If there's no questions or conversation, is there I'd welcome a motion to approve the policy and procedure manual update as presented.
So moved.
I move to,
I'm sorry, I was trying to get my mic off. I have a quick question.
Let's go to, I think we have a second already. I wasn't sure, did we had a motion, and then we'll open it up for discussion for you, Georgia,
Okay,
here.
thank you.
Who seconded?
And I'll second.
Paul. Okay, and now let's open it for discussion. What's your question, Georgia?
Well, do we know what the financial impact of the jury duty policy change is? I mean, if we're talking about struggling with budgets, I'm not disputing whether philosophically they should get paid or not get paid. I'm just saying budgetarily, what are the financial impacts to that decision?
It's hard to say exactly because jury duty can be 2 days or 3 weeks. And that's why we want to leave it up to the discretion of the executive director to analyze that potential impact to the budget. But I can't say a fixed amount of what that impact would be because it varies how many days someone's on jury duty.
I'll say it is pretty infrequent. I mean, again, so talking to folks here at ORCAA, so Tyson served on for 3 weeks on jury duty in October, November, I think it was. But that was, I think, the first time that ORCAA had ever had a staff that had been out for that period of time. Again, as Tyson said, usually it's a few days here and there. So my guess is it's probably a minimal impact.
Okay. I was just curious if we had any kind of idea if that would be a realistic impact to the budget, but if this has not come up frequently, then it probably isn't.
Yeah, it was just that, again, it came up since Tyson had 3 weeks, we had in the previous PNP manual that it was capped at 10 days. And given the situation, that seemed kind of arbitrary, was not able to figure out a reason why there was that cap on 10 days. I talked a little bit with our attorney about sort of how is this handled in other agencies. There's not really a standard. And so it really is up to the agency to determine. So that's how we got to this recommendation.
Did you look at what I would imagine there's an RCW as far as you brought up the question when you were giving your presentation on this issue of accepting the pay for jury duty as well as the pay, and is that a problem to do so? Have you looked at that?
Again, there's no law that
Okay.
prohibits that. It's really left up to the entity to make that decision themselves. For us, we view the jury duty pay is so minimal. For example, when I was at jury duty, I had to drive up to Tacoma Monday through Friday. So it was really travel reimbursement, my jury duty pay, because it was so very minimal.
I would say to some degree, the reason I'm asking this question is we pay $10 in Grace Harbor County for jurors. And so I don't know what our policy is regarding this. And so I think that we need to look at that because we are always struggling to get jurors. And are we within our own organization creating an issue where it's just not feasible for somebody to be a juror? Because it's an important aspect of what we do. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Right. Dan, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say anecdotally, my wife just served on jury duty for Thurston County. She's retired. She did 2 days on a jury. She got $24. So when she retired from Pierce County, that would have been less than an hour of her salary.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second on the floor. Any additional conversation? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of the proposed updates to the policy and procedures manual as presented today, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that motion passes. Great. Now we'll turn it over to Jeff, and maybe Jeff as the other Jeff as well. I'm not sure. We're gonna talk a little bit about our the cybersecurity incident that was just referenced last week or last month, and then we'll be going into Pat McNally. I think. Thanks for being here, Jeff and Pat, I should say, and then so we're in open session now. We'll go and get into some of the details that are covered under the privilege of executive session subsequent to this open conversation. But Jeff, take it away.
Great. So I'll just give kind of a quick overview, and then I think we could move into executive session for the discussion. So again, so we've got Pat McNally with us this morning, or this afternoon for you, Pat. So thank you for being here. Pat is an attorney with Octillo, the cybersecurity law firm that's been working with ORCAA from the beginning on this. So let me just say, as I mentioned at the January meeting, on December 18th, ORCAA fell victim to a cybersecurity scam. But as soon as staff recognized what was going on, the compromised laptop was removed from the network and passwords were changed. We alerted Endurus, our insurance provider, about the breach, and then they activated our cybersecurity policy, put us in touch with Beasley, a cybersecurity firm, and Octillo, the law firm specializing in these issues. And so their investigation was completed in January. And as I shared at the January meeting, there was no agency information was lost or otherwise compromised. So I think that's all that I want to say in open session. But then maybe we move to executive session and give then a chance for more detailed discussion.
Sounds good. So we are going into an executive session. Let's see that.
Yep.
Under
Yes,
RCW 42.30.110 to discuss a cybersecurity incident, continuing from the new business. No action will be taken in executive session. We're being joined by our legal counsel, both legal counsels?
Yes.
Yes. And our executive director and also our finance director and IT staff.
And just for the record, the specific executive session authorization is in 42.30.110(1)(a)(ii), which deals with cybersecurity incidents in particular.
Thank you for that clarification.
And so also need to clarify when, I think we had said perhaps 20 minutes. So that would be coming out of executive session at 11:22.
You think that's enough time? All right, we'll be going in for 20 minutes, leaving, going into executive session 11:02, coming out at 11:22, and we'll see you back in open session at that time. All right, we are coming out of session back into out of executive session back into open session, and I forgot the number we were under, but there's no action taken. And we are returning to our regular schedule here, so we'll turn it over to Jeff for the executive director report.
Okay, actually, why don't you just hold on a sec? We still need to get people back in the room here.
Oh, yeah.
Because we need to pick up on minutes and things. So hopefully, let's just give it another moment or two.
All right. Well, I do see it here where we're in executive session under RCW 42.30.110 parentheses 1 parentheses A parentheses 2. Thanks for including that. Sorry, I didn't see it. But again, no action taken, and we'll wait for the rest of the staff to come back in.
Right. All right, well, I think we can go ahead and start. I've just got a couple things I was going to mention today. First, I'm happy to report that there's finally been a little movement on our state core funding. There's movement afoot to get the core grant agreements in place. Again, the total for this fiscal year, as we learned last at the end of October, is going to be about $47,130, both for this fiscal year and next fiscal year. So that's reduced from what we were expecting of about $135,000. But but at least the grant agreements are moving forward. And then I keep hearing that the federal money will be released any day. We'll see. But again, that's expected to be 174,000 for each fiscal year. So knock on wood, maybe March, I'll be able to say that those grant agreements are finally in place. So the other topic that I wanted to mention today is, and that this is what the document, there's a briefing memo linked from the agenda, is information about the strategic plan. And again, this, as you probably, or as many of you remember, the strategic plan has been on my list to work on since arriving here just over 4 years ago. And it's, in fact, it's one of the performance measures for my current 2-year contract with the board that runs through June of next year. But as has been going on for the past almost 4 years, other priorities just come in and keep moving the strategic plan lower and lower on the priority list. And so, and again, so the briefing memo outlines some of the things that in my mind are higher priority than updating the strategic plan. And so my recommendation is that I, again, just continue to leave the strategic plan in a holding pattern, but that we revisit it during the first quarter of the next fiscal year, kind of look and see what things look like. But I also, in addition, I included with my briefing memo, the core concepts document from the 2018 plan. Again, I think that this plan was done before any of the current board members were on the board, but it does, again, offer, I think, a roadmap of the core work that ORCAA, frankly, is still doing. Again, we've got our authorities from the Federal Clean Air Act, the State Clean Air Act, and that is still very much kind of where we're focused on. And again, if you look at the 6 things and what we're doing, and again, my recommendations for the things that I prioritize higher than updating the strategic plan are all along the lines of one of those 6 core concepts. So really, again, because I wanted to have this discussion with you because the strategic plan is part of my performance measure, is one of my performance measures, that the plan will be done by, or the idea was that it would be completed by the end of the fiscal year 2027 timeframe. And now I'm saying that I'm wanting to push this out further. And so I just wanted to have that conversation with you, or see if you have any questions or concerns or requests of me in the context of an updated agency strategic plan.
Thanks, Jeff. That questions or thoughts on this? And Joan, you might have been here for the 2018 strategic plan. Is that right? Oh, you're muted.
I was here. Are you expecting me to remember some details?
You're the keeper of the institutional knowledge at this point, Joan. Sorry, yeah.
Well, I'll have to brush up on that a bit.
Okay. Well, I looked through just like the high points, and it makes sense. We'll go to Mike.
I was just gonna say I don't have any concerns. That seems fine to me.
Great, thanks, Mike. And I concur with that. Any other thoughts or concerns? I think silence is your friend in this one, Jeff. So, yep, carry on.
All right, well, so I will bring this back the first quarter of the next fiscal year. Again, I do see some benefits to having an updated plan, and actually, frankly, it's the conversations with staff and the board that I think would be helpful. And so, but maybe there's a way to do that more of a streamlined way, kind of using our 2018 plan. Again, and we certainly don't need to start from scratch. So maybe it's just a tune-up of what we already have. But anyway, so I'll keep this in the holding pattern for now. Thank you. Thanks for that input. And certainly if you have any other things that you want me to think about, pass that information along. So that's all I had, but I did actually want to give perhaps Jeff Myers a quick opportunity to update the board on because I know a couple weeks ago, something happened with regards to the PNWRE
Oh, and the
Like good news.
PNWRE, permit, decision that the Pollution Control Hearings Board issued, last November has been appealed. It was first of all appealed to Thurston County Superior Court. That appeal has now been certified up to the Court of Appeals. The record is being transmitted from the Pollution Control Hearings Board to the Court of Appeals. And once that is done, that will trigger the filing of briefs by the parties. We'll be working together with PNWRE as the respondents to respond to our Earth Justice's appeal brief.
Okay, great. Great. So, okay, and then actually one more interlude before going to Mike for the compliance manager update. If I could ask Debbie to give just a brief update, because the work is moving forward full speed ahead with our new agency database. So that's work that Debbie's been very involved in.
Yes, it is definitely moving forward. We meet with them every week. We have received a staging platform, which is basically a blank database. Jen and I will be working on adding some data into the database so that we can kind of play around and try to figure out what we're going to be needing for customization from what they've created to what we actually need for our system. We recently met with them and went through our data, most of our database, to kind of give them an idea of what the information that we're collecting. And that'll also help with the customization and the migration of our data into this new system. We did give them a copy of our database just the other day as well. They had the back end, we gave them the front end now so they can play around with it as well. So we'll just keep meeting with them, and the timeline hasn't changed. We're still looking at late summer.
Great.
Hopefully that'll happen.
Great. Yep. It's exciting that, again, a big agency project that is moving forward on schedule.
That's great. It's very exciting.
Okay. So now I think we can go to Mike.
All right.
Yep.
Well, I'm just gonna say I'll keep it short. I know we're busy. Staff's had some training, technical training that's given free from Westar. I think it's free. Yeah, it is. And it's just a Western United States group of air quality stuff that, different technical training. They've done way over 30 inspections this last month. The engineers have we started getting some emission inventory. I just bring that up, forms back, because I mentioned it every county focus. I say how many facilities we get emission inventory from. Well, we sent those all out in January, and they're coming back, and we got about half of them back. It looks like 78 were sent out, and that's not including the Title V, the large stuff. Other than that, they are busy with complaints, busy with inspections, and busy with NOCs. The NOCs being notice of construction for the permits for businesses. So they plugging away, and you have the packet. If you have any questions on that, feel free to ask now or get a hold of me later. But I'll just keep it really short that way.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Any questions on compliance? Notice of construction, complaints, any of that? All right. Well, thanks for keeping it brief. We are running a little late here, so we'll pass it over to Adele, I think, next.
Thanks. Dan, can you bring up my slide? Thank you. So this is also relatively short. Next slide. So January, you can see we have our typical winter, well, maybe not typical these years, but this year, yellows and some darker yellows indicating we had some air stagnation events that caused air quality to be moderate in Clallam. Pretty much all of our counties except for maybe Pacific stayed pretty clean, and that all sort of happened region-wide. Also at the beginning of January, you saw a few moderate days as well. But we also had a lot of dark green, which are good, under 5 micrograms per meter cubed. So hopefully not too many poor health effects for our region. Okay.
Odell, can you just take a moment, especially with our new members, to kind of link this back to Dr. McCormick's presentation and the 9 parts per million, the PM 2.5?
Sure. So these are daily averages, which we would have would consider the short term. The long term is more of an annual average or your long-term exposure. So each of these squares represents a short-term exposure. And so what she was saying was that for the EPA, that's set at 35 micrograms per meter cubed. So that's that if it goes into the orange. And we did not exceed that in any of our sites at all. But she also said that the ATS was that?
Yeah, American Thoracic Society.
Yeah, recommended 25 micrograms per meter cubed. So you can see that's the moderate plus, which is that darker yellow. And we did see that in Forks and one day in Lacey, where we may have gotten up to 25 or somewhere between 20 and 35. So as far as EPA national air quality standards are concerned, we didn't approach that or we didn't exceed that at any of our sites, but we were seeing moderate and moderate plus days at several locations in our region. And so those are still of concern for health, especially among the elderly, people with underlying health conditions and children. So that is one of the reasons we try really hard to, Dan is working on wood stove control that contributes to a lot of this, especially in the winter when we get these stagnation events. They usually come with very cold temperatures, and so people are more likely to crank their fireplaces and their wood stoves up for heating, and it doesn't take very many of them before a region will pop into yellow and orange. So we do see this frequently in the winter when we have very cold stagnant episodes. Most of our regions will start to see higher PM 2.5. Does that help? Greg?
Thank you.
Okay. So next slide. And other updates. So again, we monitor ozone in the summer, so that wouldn't be a winter pollutant here. But we've been very busy, site visits to Pahocus Peak as we get that site, you know, it's up and running, but there's still a few little kinks to work out. So have been working on that. Rob and I went up on the 8th of January to do that. And also Port Townsend, Lacey, Shelton, all did some site visits there. One of the big things that I've been working with Tyson this last month is our EPA grant for the NCORE site, which was Chesapeake, is now Pahocus Peak. That has to go under review due to an executive order. So EPA asked us to update the work plan. And along with that, because of the additional expenses for the move, we ended up doing a budget amendment as well to shift. It didn't change the overall amount of money that we got for that grant, but it shifted it from categories that we didn't end up using into categories that we ended up using a lot more of. So now we're more in line with how we actually spent those funds, and that's on record. And then I've also been processing the historical data for Thurston County, the air quality data for our focus next month. And that's been really interesting. We've got a lot of data and a lot of history here in Thurston County. So I'm excited to show that to you. And I had a quick question, actually, Tyson. Well, we can talk about it after, but the budget amendments that you showed in for our overall budget for CPO, does that reflect that or is that different?
Well, we can talk about that.
Okay. All right. So okay. So that's all I've got. Unless there are questions.
Thanks so much.
Was there a
Adele, any
question?
questions?
Was there a question about the Olympia monitoring? So why isn't there an Olympia monitoring site?
We had an Olympia site for many years, which I will talk about next month, but the powers that be that were before my time decided that the Lacey site at Mountain View Elementary was the most representative of the region. And we saw some of the worst air quality there, largely due to wood stoves in the community. So when we had to choose a site for the county, that's where it was chosen. But there are data that we had from Olympia. And now with the advent of sensors and community-owned sensors, we can really evaluate that and look at the whole region again. So we just have one site per county and it's in Lacey.
Oh, I was just making a joke. I was like, Olympia. No accountability.
We like Lacey.
Okay. Any other questions for Odell? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to Dan and take all that where we've caught up on my perception that we're behind. So
So I'm still going to keep it brief. I'm going to start with an apology. This month we moved to new Zoom protocols. We got a Zoom webinar slash meeting account, gives us greater control. I opted to stick to a meeting protocol instead of a webinar, so it looks like it previously had. There is some, excuse me, some registration login things that some of you noted that you add your name and email address, and then it says, are you visiting remotely or in person? Uh, there's a lot of security protocols that are buried deep in Zoom menus I've tried to control. You'll also remember you got a bunch of emails from ORCAA as well as from Zoom because I listed all the board members as Zoom presenters as well as attendees. So you got an email as an attendee, you got an email as a presenter, and then you got an email from Debbie. And so trying to find those controls, 5 or 6 menus deep in Zoom. Again, my apologies. I think we got it straightened out. There's still some things to hammer out, but the bottom line is we have greater controls now. So if there are problems, if somebody tries to Zoom bomb ORCAA meeting, we have the ability to shut off their cameras, their microphones, move them to a waiting room, or ban them from the meeting completely. So we have a lot more control with this protocol. So it's not as convenient as it was for you, but we do have greater control and security over our meetings at this point. So we'll continue to refine that. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. But I will continue to work on making sure our meetings are as secure and easy to use as possible for both board members and the public. That said, moving into communications work, the Wood Stove program is continuing to thrive. Usually in the winter months, we see a huge slowdown. We have seen a little bit of a slowdown, but as mentioned in our budget updates, I anticipate our biennial grant to be fully expended, half of it fully expended this financial year, even though we didn't get the contract signed until late October. We did have a really robust income qualified program that we included in this grant cycle. That was a request or requirement from the state, and we've seen good response from that. We've always had a modest low income program that hasn't really been taken advantage of or used by people, and we've already seen a couple programs funded and 2 or 3 more that have been approved and looking for funding in the next couple months. For outreach, spring is a big time for us to get out to home shows. I've got the Jefferson County Home Show March 7th planned. We're going to do the Olympia Master Builders Home Show in Lacey again. That's the Thurston County, Mason County combined home show. I've registered for the Grace Harbor, which is Grace Harbor Pacific County combined show. And then in Clallam County, we haven't had great success at their home show. It's more of a home remodel and arts and crafts type show. So we've had better response the last year with a radio campaign there. So I've been talking to their organizer. The radio management company also runs the home show. So we're going to do some in studio work with that radio station as well as get some PSAs from them in return, and do some direct outreach to Clallam and Jefferson through the airwaves instead of during the Port Angeles home show. So, and then working with the engineering and inspector teams, doing direct outreach to the permitting and planning departments for cities and counties throughout our jurisdiction. So that's the big outreach work for the spring. Um, and then just a note again, we try to maximize our dollars spent as much as possible. So our outreach collaborations. I work closely with the Northwest Air Quality Communicators. I've been a part of that since I joined ORCAA 22 years ago. But we've also launched the South Sound Communicators Group for Thurston and uh, Eastern Mason, Southern Pierce County, and coordinating outreach efforts with other public agencies, nonprofits, uh, universities, and higher education industry individuals, and basically seeing if we can't amplify our message across all of our social media through combined campaigns. So I will leave it at that. If you have any questions or recommendations or concerns, let me know.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Lots of work going on the communication side. Any questions for Dan on communications?
Yeah, Dan, is the prevention of Zoom bombers in preparation for the increased fees that we're talking about?
We hope not. It's knowing that it's happened to some of our partner. It's happened to Puget Sound Clean Air. It's happened to Spokane Region Clean Air. If an agency does something that has any public interest or controversy, it could possibly happen. So I just want to make sure that I have the best tools possible to shut them down if we need to.
Cool, thanks, Dan.
That said,
I was happy
as a former journalist, I am all about open and accessible government. So I want to
Yeah,
make sure we're as open and as transparent as possible, but I also want to make sure we're not taken advantage of.
thank you, Dan.
Thanks for the joke, Emily. I always appreciate a good joke. All right. Well, if there's no other questions for Dan, let's move on to Tyson and the financial services manager update.
All right, it's gonna be short and sweet, following the trend of really quick updates. So about 5 months ago, I reported a building leak to the board. I'm happy to report that we found the leak and we repaired it. So we're not overusing water.
This is a water leak, not the roof leak.
Right, we have two separate leaks. One of them has been repaired. It was actually attributable to a toilet in the tenant side of the building. The rubber gasket seal, part of the toilet it was deformed, so it was letting water leak into it. Something I would have never imagined to look for. We just happened to be in that room and we could hear the toilet running. So it's pretty fortuitous that we caught it. It was a simple fix, very cheap. You should be getting a credit from the city of Olympia for that over usage of water. So we're expecting that. And then lastly, I'm also happy to report that our Well City application for 2025 was accepted by AWC. So what that means for us is we get a 2% discount on our health insurance premiums for 2026. So last year that saved approximately $5,500. So well worth it. That's all I have, Greg.
All right. Great. Well, we've caught up. Anything for the good of the order? We've got a little moment if anyone on the board has something to share or contribute. Okay. Great. Well, I will just reiterate next month, in the finance committee, I think we'll be looking at the budget and then it'll come in front of the full board at the April meeting that we're doing in person. So do pencil in the what is it? The April meeting for the in-person and a little extended field trip as well to commemorate the new air quality, air testing station. You know, if you have some extra time for the next month, all would benefit probably from looking through that first budget document that'll be in the Finance Committee's packet. Okay, one more call. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, we'll give everyone 10 minutes back. I usually like to take credit, but I think all the director reports were pretty succinct today, so we'll give credit to staff and adjourn this meeting of the ORCAA meeting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Just
Jeff.
gonna ask Paul if you could stay on for a couple minutes so we can coordinate with Ryan for a meeting for the three of us to get together.
Okay, great. Well, with that, we are adjourned. Everyone have a great week, and we'll see you next month.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.